I spent 7 years in prison for a murder I didn't commit. Now I'm out, and the people who set me up have no idea I'm coming. Hey there, friends. Welcome to our channel, The Wicked Gate. The heavy gates behind me slammed shut with a loud clang that echoed through my chest. The bolt thudded into place like it was sealing away 5 long years of my life. I turned around, staring up at the towering stone walls and thick wooden doors that had kept me locked up all this time. All right, Tyler, what now? That question spun through my head like a storm. The thought of revenge stirred inside me, not clear on who deserved it yet, but I knew I needed to tread carefully. I'd already spent 7 years serving the Queen's sentence. That was more than enough. I started down the narrow path that led away from the prison gates. Across the road, a small group stood at the bus stop, probably heading to work. Their eyes were on me. I figured this wasn't the first time they'd watched someone walk out of those gates, and it wouldn't be the last. Just as I neared the end of the road, I spotted them, reporters, a few of them, peeling away from the crowd and turning their lenses toward me. Great. The bottom feeders were still at it. They'd hounded me for years, feeding off my story like vultures. I ducked into a small cafe just off the high street, hoping for a quiet moment. I was barely halfway through my coffee when she slid into the booth across from me. "Mr. Carpenter," she began, voice low and steady. "First off, I'm not a reporter. Second, I think I can help you. And honestly, I need your help too. Just hear me out, please." I narrowed my eyes, studying her face. It was a look meant to scare people off, a leftover instinct from prison. But she didn't flinch. Not even a flicker of fear in her expression. All right, she was different. "You've got it all wrong if you think we're going to agree on anything," I muttered. She gave me a tight frown and I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Found her weak spot. She didn't like being called girl. A lot of women don't. "Some of us are specialists," she said, shifting her tone. "We look into suspicious claims, fraud, false insurance, that sort of thing. That's our real job. So why were you talking to me?" "I haven't filed any claims." She hesitated, then leaned in. "My father and I, we work for Carr and Associates. He had a file on you. On William and Mary Simmons. The murder." That hit me like a jolt. "I had no idea he was still watching Simmons," she went on. "Thought it was all over once you confessed. The claim was settled years ago. But from the notes in that file, my dad kept tabs on Simmons for a long time after your conviction. And it looks like Simmons quietly sold off everything Mary had, converted all her assets to cash. It was clear now, this wasn't some random visit. She'd done her homework, and someone had arranged that car waiting outside for me, complete with everything I needed. I had managed to keep my offshore investments well out of Angela's reach, hidden from her greedy hands. That was one small victory I could still claim. As I stepped through the front door, Ronnie's voice hit me like a slap. "Where the heck have you been, man?" "I was being followed," I muttered, kicking the door closed behind me. "Right from the prison gate. I'm trying not to have the entire neighborhood know where I sleep." "You're on parole," he shot back. "Keep your head down and they won't bother you." "Yeah. Tell that to the woman who was tailing me. Said something about insurance but didn't give me much else." He sighed. "I sent Ralph over to set up a visit for you, figured it'd be good for you to see the kids again. But when he got there, the place was empty. She was gone. No note. No forwarding address. Nothing." "What?" My voice dropped. "Why would Angela do that?" Ronnie shrugged. "Speculation, man. She's still got that court order, remember? You're not allowed within a mile of her place. Maybe she's scared. You were pretty loud back in the day." He gave me this half grin like it was some kind of joke. I didn't find it funny. After 7 long years without a woman, I wasn't gonna lie. Being around Jenny stirred something in me. Now that I had a better look at her, she was definitely all woman. Not exactly my type. Bit older, curvier than I usually went for, but after all that time inside, I wasn't in a position to be picky. And by the way she was acting, I could tell she had more than just business on her mind. While I was halfway through dinner, Jenny stepped out of the room. When I called out to her, she came back, and I'll admit I was speechless for a second. She was completely naked. Just standing there, calm as anything. No warning, no hesitation. We didn't talk much after that. But even before, she'd made it clear this was more than just some professional visit. Later that night, as we lay tangled in the sheets, she spoke up again. "They asked me a few questions about Simmons," she said quietly, "but I don't think they ever really believed us." "Who would?" "Mary Simmons had a spotless image. Nobody wanted to think she was mixed up in anything shady." I nodded slowly. "And the guys on the street weren't about to run to the cops either. They just kept their mouths shut while the police tried to pin her murder on anyone with a pulse." Jenny sat up, brushing her hair out of her face. Anyway, she said with a little smirk, we've got your mess to sort out first. She yanked the duvet away and gave me a playful look. Wow, that's impressive. I couldn't help but grin. She chuckled and said, you know how I caught my ex? With that stupid barmaid. That was my wake-up call. Taught me to keep my eyes open. Let me finish, I said, trying to focus. I'm almost there. Jenny and I wrapped up our morning workout. I was reaching for my phone to call Helen Caffrey, but Jenny stopped me before I could dial. No, don't call her, she said. I'll go get her myself. Catch her off guard. You tidy yourself up. It'll be better that way. She had a point. If we surprised Helen, maybe we'd get more out of her. I agreed, and Jenny headed off while I took a few minutes to freshen up. By the time I came back downstairs, Jenny was already leading Helen into the lounge. I followed, keeping my posture calm, but inside I was bracing myself. A few days later, all hell broke loose. The cops came pounding through my front door, full force, shouting and waving a warrant. Before I could even ask what was happening, I was being handcuffed. They were charging me with the murder of Mary Simmons. I thought it was a joke at first, but it wasn't. They claimed they'd found all kinds of evidence connecting me to Mary, receipts from hotels, matchbooks from the same places, even a champagne bottle with my fingerprints on it. They said there was a glass too. All found in the hotel room where Mary died. Then, to top it off, some hotel worker swore up and down that I'd been there, that he'd delivered something to the room while I was inside. It felt like a trap, like someone had been planning this for a long time. Helen sat me down a few days later and walked me through some of the details. You remember that school interview for your kid? The one Angela supposedly arranged last minute after bumping into the headmistress. Yeah, I said. What about it? That interview was booked over 2 months earlier, Helen replied. I've already spoken to the headmistress. She's retired now, but she remembered it clearly. At the same time, Helen reached for the briefcase she'd brought with her. She pulled out a file and slid a piece of paper across the table. And that's when it hit me. I'd never been much for champagne, too bubbly, too fancy for my taste. But about 4 months before Mary Simmons was murdered, Angela had asked me to open a bottle of champagne for their wedding anniversary. It was the same kind of bottle the cops found at the hotel. Until that moment, I hadn't made the connection. But it was right there in front of me. They'd been setting me up for months. Every detail had been planned out, even down to that champagne. I sat back, jaw tight, and muttered, "You're right. It all lines up now. I didn't see it before, but it's all there. Every piece." I told Jenny and Helen about the champagne. I trusted them. They were the only ones who hadn't turned their backs on me. But Helen still looked uneasy. "Look, I get that you're angry," she said. "But if your private investigator believed in your innocence, why didn't he do something? Why didn't he speak up?" "Oh yeah," I said, eyes narrowing. "And who refused to see Inspector Harris when he came to visit me in prison a few weeks back?" She didn't answer, so I kept going. "Frank and Gary tried to get through to me too, remember? But how did I respond?" "Oh yeah, I told the FBS to go take a walk. That's what the warden said I told them, right? I wouldn't even see you, Helen." I paused, then sighed. "Yeah, I guess I did say something like that. Maybe a little more colorful. I'd assumed she was just another nosy reporter, so I stayed guarded at first. But then she dropped a line that made me pause. For the record, she said, my husband and I are divorced, but his parents have been incredible with the kids." I didn't know what to say. The best I could manage was, "Oh." She glanced at me, maybe sensing the awkwardness, then added with a wry smile, "We sort of split after he got a little too friendly with his assistant. He didn't care much for my interest in boxing either." I raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like a great match." "Oh, it wasn't," she replied. "I knocked him out cold." I stared at her, unsure if she was joking. And she ran screaming from the hotel room. "Naked," she added with a smirk. But hey, I enjoyed that moment. Helen, looking both amused and curious, asked, "Any blowback from the cops?" "None," she said breezily. "I went home and told myself I should probably cut back on drinking. But then I changed my mind and downed one of Jenny's weird cocktails instead. That stuff tasted like engine oil, but whatever was in it worked. I made a mental note to get the recipe, as awful as it was. Later, I asked Jenny, "Where are they?" She came down the stairs that curved off from the lounge. "Outside," she said casually. "Unless they've got a warrant or legal grounds, the police can't just barge in. This is your house, John, and I made sure they know they're not welcome." Moments later, Inspector Gary Harris stepped in with that stiff look he always wore, the kind that says, "We're not here to be friends." You're just a suspect in the murder of Mary Simmons, he told me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Oh, I get it, I replied. So now that you can't pin it on Bill Simmons, you're cool with me rotting in prison for 7 years? He looked at me without flinching. John, I can only act on the evidence in front of me. Really? What could possibly be more important than whether I'm innocent or not? He leaned in slightly, his tone shifting to something heavier. The safety of your ex-wife and kids. That shut me up. Harris continued, we might be able to squeeze some pressure on Curtis. He could get nervous enough to talk. And how do you plan on doing that? I asked, raising an eyebrow. As cops? We can't do much. But we could suggest that you've been talking about him. Saying he lied on the stand. Maybe let him think you're coming for him. I laughed bitterly. And if I was? Shouldn't I be furious with the guy? He helped put me away. Harris just shrugged. Most folks don't go after witnesses, at least not the ones who told the truth. But if they bent the truth, yeah, it can sting. I sat back in one of the spare chairs, letting that settle in. Jenny walked in and gave me a sideways look. I'm not sure I like where all this is heading, John, she said softly. I get that you're mad at Curtis, Jenny said carefully. But are you sure it's worth putting yourself in the line of fire like this? To be honest, Jen, I said with a sigh, I'm not wild about the idea either. But my other option is to beat the life out of the guy, and I don't think Gary or Frank would be okay with that anytime soon. Gary, who'd been half listening from across the room, chimed in without looking up. That'd definitely send you back behind bars. Jenny turned to me again, quieter this time. Still, John. I don't know. She didn't finish the thought. Maybe she didn't have to. The next morning I found out Jenny was one of those early risers. Like clockwork, she started her wake-up John routine around 5 a.m. I don't know how her ex ever found the energy to keep up with her. Honestly, the age gap between us was a relief in some ways. There was no real chemistry between us, and maybe that was for the best. Any more of her fire and I'd probably be 6 feet under by now. Later that morning, as we stepped out of the shower, I asked her, Jenny, how well did you really know Bill Simmons? She just shook her head. Hardly at all. Right about then, Bert, my so-called bodyguard, came in passing along a note from Gary Harris. He took off like someone lit a fire under him, Bert said. Right after you left. He tailed you for a bit, probably to make sure you came back here. Then he shot off down London Road. Gary was hopeful the guy might lead us to wherever Simmons was hiding out. The next 2 hours were quiet. Bert headed downstairs while Helen and I stayed up, chatting mostly about our kids, hers and mine. She opened up more about how she found out her husband had been cheating. There was a strange comfort in that shared pain, even though we barely knew each other. We passed the time with back-to-back cups of coffee, zoning out to whatever was on the TV. Around 7 o'clock we finally started thinking about dinner. I'd gone into Jenny's room to grab a quick shower and change when she walked back in with Bert in tow. I couldn't help but notice how comfortable they seemed together. And I'll admit it, I started feeling a little jealous. But that wasn't fair. The plan was for it to look like I was on my own. Jenny was just the cover. Bert's job was to keep watch without drawing attention. Jenny was just the face of it. Still, watching them side by side like that got under my skin more than I wanted to admit. By 11 o'clock that night, the pub staff were ready to shut things down. We were still waiting for a call from Harris about the car, but nothing had come through. Finally, I went to the bar phone and called him myself. Looks like a dead end, John, Gary said, tired. Might be time to give it up for tonight. Head back to the hotel and get some rest. I stepped out of the gin joint and spotted Bert across the lot, talking on his phone. I figured he must have been on with Gary or Frank, probably giving them an update. Our eyes met for just a second. That look was all we needed. He knew I was about to start walking and I knew he'd caught on. We couldn't risk signaling anything more obvious in case someone was watching. I made my move. But things went sideways, fast. I barely saw the car coming. The moment it hit me, everything blurred into instinct. I bounced off the roof, rolled across it, and landed hard on the trunk before sliding off onto the pavement. Next thing I knew, I was flat on my back, staring up at Jenny as she crouched over me, her face drawn tight with worry. John, how bad is it? Are you hurt? She asked, her voice trembling just a little. I didn't answer right away. My brain was too busy running checks. I wiggled my fingers, toes. Everything seemed to move the way it should, though I could already feel the deep throb of pain radiating from my left shoulder. I'd hit it hard, probably on the roof during the initial bounce. A little later, I woke up in a hospital room. The doctor and a nurse walked in together. The doctor looked familiar, likely the one who'd handled me earlier. I'm going to have to ask you ladies to step out, he said, looking at Jenny and Helen. Best treatment for a concussion is rest. We're going to give him a sedative. Great, I thought. I'm the one laid out here, and this guy's making decisions like I'm not even conscious. Would have been nice to at least be asked if I wanted to be knocked out again. Apparently, I'd been more out of it than I realized. According to the medical team, I'd been slipping in and out of lucidity for hours. When I came to again, I caught the tail end of some banter between Jenny and the nurse. Did he give you any trouble while I was gone? Jenny asked. The nurse gave her a cheeky smile. Saucy bugger sure did. Well, serves you right, Jenny replied, grinning. With your figure, I bet a lot of the patients around here appreciate the view. That last comment came from Helen, surprisingly. It didn't sound like her at all, and I turned my head slightly, raising an eyebrow. The nurse laughed. Most of them try to grab a handful, not eat the bloody things. I tried to smooth the tension. Sorry, I thought you were someone else, I muttered, half to the nurse, half to everyone in the room. Just trying to play it off. We'll have to try again later, when there aren't reporters crawling all over the place, Helen suggested, looking toward the window. Maybe that's exactly why they try during the chaos, I said, shrugging gently, careful not to aggravate the bruising. Later, Helen told me Gary had arranged for me to be moved into a private wing. 2 armed officers were stationed right outside the door around the clock. Does that have anything to do with why everyone's calling me Mr. Smith? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Yeah, sorry about that, Jenny said sheepishly. It was the first name that popped into my head the night of the accident. I was just trying to think ahead. I'd been doing some thinking about Harris. You know, I said to him, you're the one who locked me up with some of the roughest guys walking the planet. But the funny thing is, I made a few friends in there. Did some favors too. Gary just watched me quietly. Now I'm thinking it might be time to call a few of those favors in, I continued. But if I do that, I need to know I won't have you or your boys breathing down my neck. The 2 officers exchanged a long look. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, Harris turned to Frank. You want to step out for this? He asked. Frank shook his head. No, I'll stay. But I need one thing from you, John. If Curtis talks to you, he walks away clean from the interview. No violence. No intimidation. Fine, I said without hesitation. As long as we use a secure line. Ronnie understood exactly what I meant. We'd use a burner, something that couldn't be traced back to either of us. The calls would go out quietly, cleanly. It took another 3 days before the doctor finally decided I was fit to leave the hospital. Not that I trusted his judgment. I still felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. But it was time. No fanfare, no exit parade. I left tucked inside a laundry van. The cops swore nobody was watching the hospital, but I wasn't ready to gamble on it. Helen and Jenny picked me up at a spot we'd planned ahead of time, just a quiet turnoff down the road. They dropped me at a different, pretty secluded house. Comfortable but nothing flashy. Exactly what I needed. As we were settling in, Jenny gave me that look she gets when she's about to stir the pot. So, what do you think about Helen? She asked casually. What about her? I think she's into you, Jenny said, grinning. Really? I asked, half skeptical. And how would you know that? Well, for one, she's bringing her kids tonight. You think she'd do that if she wasn't serious about you? She wants to see how you all get on. And second, she told me herself. She said that while I was out cold? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Jenny nodded, clearly enjoying herself. Straight from the source. Just don't tell her I told you. I promised. She smirked. Before long, you 2 are gonna have a full house. You'll need a governess. Want my resume now? Give over, Jenny, I laughed. You're not even qualified. But I couldn't help smiling. Out near the car, the boys had been talking about what we were going to do with Curtis. Just hearing them speculate was enough to make me think Curtis would crack just for the chance to get out alive. We'd already made sure he wouldn't see me in the room. But I'd be able to hear every word. I told them to check with me in case anything went sideways. I got out of there as fast as I could, Curtis stammered, panicked. Haven't seen the guy since. Bollocks, one of the guys snapped. If Johnny Carpenter was really after you, you wouldn't be standing here talking. Johnny doesn't play games. So tell us, what did he want from you? The boss asked him. And where is he now? Curtis swallowed hard, visibly shaking. I told you. I never talked to him, Curtis stammered. I think he was just trying to scare me. Why would he do that? The boss asked, his voice quiet but cold. I don't know, maybe he's looking for his woman. Curtis's eyes darted around the room like he'd just woken up in a nightmare, and realized it was real. For a second I honestly thought he might bolt. His muscles tensed and he shifted like he was weighing his odds. But then something in him gave out. He slumped just a little and stayed put. "All right," the boss said, leaning in. "You were telling me about the guy Carpenter's old lady is with. Where can I find him?" "I swear I don't know exactly," Curtis muttered. "Somewhere near Southampton, I think." "And what makes you say that?" The boss's tone softened, dangerously so. Curtis hesitated, then said, "She used to meet him at this hotel. There weren't any security cameras back then, not that I saw. And there's this old fire escape right outside the window of the room she always booked. I don't think anyone working there ever noticed them coming or going." The boss shot a glance in my direction. It was subtle, but I caught it. He was out of questions, and probably wondering if I had any more to squeeze out of Curtis. To be honest, my mind was already miles away. I'd been trying to piece together something I'd forgotten, something that had been gnawing at the edges of my memory. Then it clicked. About a year back there'd been something, a lead maybe. We needed a head start. He didn't know what car I was driving, which worked in our favor. I didn't want the local cops tipped off. We parked about a mile from the house and waited for nightfall. I made sure to power off my phone. No way I was letting Gary trace my location through cell towers. Bernie and the boss sat in the front seats, passing a hip flask between them like they didn't have a care in the world. They were too calm for people waiting to break into a man's life. "You get used to it," Bernie said, noticing my sideways glance. "Waiting. Planning. You stay calm until it's time to strike." They made it sound simple. It wasn't. But things didn't go the way I planned. Angela had a gun stashed in the desk. While I was struggling with Bill, she managed to get to it. Panic must have taken over and she fired. Said it was self-defense. It hadn't been part of the original plan. Not by a long shot. But she seemed content with the outcome. "You'll both be dead," she'd said, her voice disturbingly flat. "And I won't have to arrange another accident for Bill later." Her words were still ringing in my ears. They landed, sure, but my brain was already buzzing with too many other things. I wasn't ready for what came next. I stared at Angela, voice sharp and shaking. "Where are the kids, Angela? Tell me now." She smiled, calm in the worst possible way. "Relax. They're safe." That didn't ease the storm inside me. "You tried to run me down the other day," I snapped. "That's why I couldn't see who was driving that night. You were slouched so low in the seat." She shrugged, almost amused. "The girls at school always did call me Shorty, remember?" "This isn't a joke," I growled. "You're not going to get away with this, Angela. Not this time." I was stalling for time. Every instinct in me said the boss and Bernie were close. Maybe even right outside that door. I didn't know why, but I had this strong gut feeling they were just waiting in the hallway. The only problem? Angela was sitting on the other side of the door, gun in hand. Then, everything happened at once. I don't remember the impact. Just flashes. A voice, Gary's, shouting from somewhere close. "Armed police. Drop your weapon or I will shoot." Then chaos. Gunshots exploded around me, so many and so fast I couldn't tell where they were coming from. Then just like that, everything fell quiet. I don't know if I passed out. Maybe I was just in shock. But for a while I lost all sense of time, of place. I was floating in the noise. And then, "Johnny, you okay?" The boss's voice cut through the haze. I opened my eyes. He was bending over me, concern plain on his face. It turns out, Gary and Frank had already been in the area, not too far from the forest. A tip from someone, possibly about Angela hiding out near an old care home, had been enough to put them on her trail. When the boss called, they'd been just minutes away. He and Bernie had entered the house just before the police arrived. They'd seen Angela, gun drawn, hovering over my motionless body. Gary had wanted to go in without backup, unarmed. But the boss wasn't about to let that happen. He was risking arrest just having a firearm on him, but he stepped in anyway. Angela never saw it coming. Later we learned more, like how she'd used different vehicles, switched plates, covered her tracks just well enough to keep ahead of us for a while. And then there was Jenny. By that point, whatever spark had been between us had started to cool. It wasn't gone completely. There were still nights where she'd slip into my room after the kids were asleep, but it wasn't what it had been. Over time, Helen and I both started noticing something. Jenny wasn't just drifting from me, she was moving toward someone else. And it wasn't one-sided. Bert, one of the officers who'd been posted on bodyguard duty at the hotel, had taken a clear interest in her. And soon enough it was obvious Jenny felt the same.